Hi everyone, I want to go ahead and do a part 2 because what I noticed about the book of Ezekiel, and I'm not sure why I didn't realize this before, but what I'm realizing is that the rapture is actually described in Ezekiel 1:4. And so it starts out where it says, "Now it came to pass in the 13th year, in the 4th month, in the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river of Chebar, that the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God." And so what Ezekiel is having here is a vision of the rapture, because when you get to verse 4, it describes a whirlwind, which actually should have tipped me off, because that's how Elijah was taken up. He was taken up in a whirlwind, but that just didn't register when I read this the first time, and I'll show you how I came to realize that. But over here it says, "And I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was about it, and out of the midst thereof as the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire." Okay, so what happened is I was looking at images of Ezekiel 1:4 when I came across this image over here, which is not coming up in the images now for some reason, and I noticed that it was talking about Ezekiel 1:4, and it said, "And from within the middle of the heavenly scroll there was a fire. The appearance of the middle was amber." And I've talked about the color amber before. That's the color of the resin of bdellium, which is where the first river in the Garden of Eden branched off into the river Pison, and there was gold in that land, and also bdellium and the onyx stone. Okay, and the precious onyx is what was coming up at the very tip of this triangle, or actually it looks like a crystal on its side with the words ray. It has the word light, ray, and the word Cheops, which is another word for the Great Pyramid of Giza. And right at the pinnacle of this pyramid or triangle, you have the precious onyx. Okay, and the Strong's number for onyx is the number 7718. As I've mentioned before, I've also mentioned that 68 is the number that's used for the headstone, the chief cornerstone. I'll go ahead and show you that. You can see that Strong's number 68 means stone, precious stones, and it's also the plummet that's talked about in Zechariah 4:7 and 4:10, which is the headstone of the temple, where it says, "Who art thou, a great mountain? Before Zerubbabel thou shalt become a plain, and he shall bring forth the headstone thereof with shoutings, crying, Grace, grace unto it." Of course, the headstone is Jesus. He is the capstone of the temple. And then it goes on to say, "For who hath despised the day of small things," because this is really talking about DNA, which is what I want to get into. "For they shall rejoice when they shall see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel with those 7. They are the eyes of the Lord, which run to and fro through the whole earth." So the eyes represent the 7 candlesticks, the church, and then the plummet is the capstone, the stone that's placed at the top of the temple, and it's also the plumb line that God uses to measure the temple. Okay, so this is where the onyx stone was coming up, and this is where you have bdellium, which I've talked about, and bdellium comes from a word that means to divide. It comes from the word badal in the Hebrew, but over here it says that it's a gum resin, and the color of it is the color of amber. And it also talks about bdellium when it talks about the hidden manna, which is Jesus. Jesus is the hidden manna. It says that in Revelation 2:17, and he's the bread of life. And so over here it says, "And the manna was as coriander seed, and the color thereof as the color of bdellium." And bdellium is the color of amber. Okay, so I was looking at images of Ezekiel 1:4, and this image came up over here, which is referring to the whirlwind as a scroll, and in the middle of the scroll was the appearance of the color of amber. And so they're talking about how the color of amber is the color that was in the scroll. And then again in 127, which I've talked about before, where it's talking about the loin area, the appearance was the color of amber. And then again in Ezekiel 1:16. Okay, so I looked at this in the Greek at first, and over here it says, and I looked and I saw, and I noticed it has the word spirit over here. And then I looked up this word over here, which I'll go ahead and show you that. Okay, I just copy and pasted it, and I got this definition over here, which means to lift. Okay, so in the Greek it reads, and I looked and I saw the Spirit lift up, coming from the north in a cloud, or large cloud or great cloud, in him, and this color, this means brightness around him, and fire spreading out, and, or actually this word means lightning. Okay, you can see it right here. It means a flash or lightning, and it's actually only used one time in the New Testament, and it's used in Luke 9:29, which is interesting. The symmetry of that's interesting, and it says, as he was praying, the appearance of his face was altered, and his clothes became white and dazzling. And in the middle of him as the vision of, and then this is the color amber over here, in the middle the fire, and this word over here means brightness in him. Okay, and so I realized that it was talking about the rapture when I saw this word over here, which means to lift up. Also notice that it mentioned the Spirit over here, which I don't believe it mentions in the English, but when you look at it in the Hebrew, it actually does mention the word ruach right here, which is the Holy Spirit. I'll just go ahead and show you that. Okay, you can see it means wind, breath, spirit, but it's the word that's used in reference to the Holy Spirit. So you can see over here in Genesis 1:2, where it says, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And this is a verse that I've talked about before, because the word moved upon is Strong's number 2018. Okay, and I'll go ahead and show you that. You can see that word over here in the Greek. This is the bringing forth of the waters. You can see right there, I just copy and pasted it. You can see it's Strong's number 2018, and it means to bring upon or to bring forth. And if you look at the previous Strong's number, it's the word to shine upon or to give light. It's basically the word that's used for the appearance of Christ. And this Strong's number, or this word, ranges from Strong's numbers 2014 through 2017. It's also where the word epiphany and Jesus came up, or theophany, which means the appearance of God, and Jesus came up in the table that I did, and it came up with 17 matches, and it came up in Matthew 2014 through 2017 in the matrix. I've shown that before. Okay, it was actually 27 matches. I just wanted to make that correction, but I'm going by memory since I can't pull up the Bible Code Wisdom, but I did several videos about that. Okay, so it's saying And I looked, and behold, the Ruach and a whirlwind or a storm came out of the north. And the word north means, it can mean north as in direction, but it also means properly hidden or an obscure place. And so the whirlwind came from the north, and I just wanted to show you some images of what a whirlwind looks like, because it's very similar to the imagery here, and I'm just going to slow it down so that you can see it. So that looks like a whirlwind, and then you have the hand and the light coming out. Okay, so within this whirlwind or scroll, as it was described in this article over here, you had the color of amber. Okay, and then from then on out, it begins to describe the DNA, starting from verse 5. This is all a description of the DNA, possibly while it's being replicating, because I do believe this represents the rapture over here in verse 4. And then you have the description of the DNA, and then when you get to verse 22, which is the number having to do with DNA, and 23, that's when it talks about the firmament and the terrible crystal. And as I've mentioned before, I believe the crystal represents DNA. Incidentally, it's in this table over here where it talks about the crystal. Okay, as you can see, that was coming up in Job 28, where it had the word Cheops, which is another name for the Great Pyramid of Giza, and it seems to be describing the Great Pyramid of Giza. It talks about the rocks and cutting out channels through the rocks, and it's saying that he overturneth mountains. He putteth forth his hand upon the flinty rock, he overturneth mountains by the roots, and this sounds like the DNA turning. It talks about binding the streams in verse 11, which is a number having to do with DNA. And then when you get to verses 16 through 18 is where it says it cannot be valued with the gold of Ophir, with the precious onyx, or with the sapphire. Gold and glass cannot equal it, neither shall it be exchanged for jewels or fine gold. No mention shall be made of the coral or crystal, yea, the price of wisdom is above rubies. And so you have the mention of crystal here in verse 18. And I've shown how the word crystal comes up in Revelation 4:6, which is a number having to do with DNA, as well as 11 and 22. And as you can see here in Revelation 22:1, it proceeds from the throne of God as a pure river. The water of life proceeds out of the throne of God, clear as crystal. And so I did some research to try to confirm that it's referring to DNA. And as you can see here, it says that it's a solid material whose constituents, such as atoms, molecules, or ions, are arranged in a highly ordered microscopic structure, forming a crystal lattice that extends in all directions. I also found this video which seems to confirm that DNA is crystalline, and I'll go ahead and play that.
Spots on the photographic film, which fairly sharp spots, which indicated it was fibre consisted of a mass of crystals of DNA, and so that's the evidence that DNA was crystalline.
Okay, and so I believe this represents the consummation of the covenant, and then when you get to the next chapter, that's when the two witnesses are commissioned. Ezekiel is told to stand on his feet. Of course, it's the two olive trees that stand and the 144,000 that stand on their feet. And so this happens after the Spirit enters into Ezekiel, which is the same word. It's the word Ruach over here. And so I just wanted to explain that. And in my next video, I'll continue with part 2 of the IPEC GOAT analysis. Thanks for watching, and God bless you.